Namaskar, Nilesh here with another session of Shraddha and Pradnya. Very recently, I created one session based on a request of an individual. As I said, it wasn't so much a question, but this individual asked me if I would be willing to put together the astronomy evidence, specific astronomy evidence in the context of Karna-Vadha, killing of Karna, which is to say he was asking for a specific evidence related to a specific instance of the Mahabharata war. And he might have asked this for his own reasons, but I thought that was a good opportunity. In a way, I took that as a question, and I created one session that you would have already watched before this. If not, you should go and watch that session. It is Karna-Vadha and astronomy evidence of the Mahabharata. And I think that started this chain now. I received another request saying, is there something, is there a specific evidence in the context of killing of a Shalya? So that would come in a Shalya Parva. In the context of Ashwatthama killing sons of Draupadi and many Pandava side warriors on the last day night, okay? Or is there any specific evidence for the last day of the war? Now, what these three things that I just described, they essentially happen on the last day of the war. And if one has to go looking at, or rather presenting all the nitty-gritty evidence, that will be a boring session. So I'm going to restrict myself to a very distinguishable, identifiable, specific pieces of evidence and present it here. In fact, when I started preparing for this session based on that request, I realized, not that I did not know it before, but I realized that there is actually a lot of things that are happening on the last day of the war, the 18th day of the war. And it did get extended into the late night and practically continued, the related affairs continued into the next day. Very similar to what happened on the 14th day of the war. Like that's 14th day is very close to the full moon day. And after Arjun killed Jayadratha at the end of the day on 14th day, actually the fighting continued through the whole night with a gap of about 2+ hours, okay, after midnight. And the 14th night of the war is also very interesting because some people have made it controversial. And so we will address that too. But today, just in this session, I will only focus on astronomy evidence specific to killing of a Shalya and specific to the last day of the Mahabharata war. Everyone knows that Yudhishthira killed Shalya on the 18th day of the Mahabharata war. So let's begin with that. All right. Shalya-Vadha and astronomy evidence. This was the 18th and the last day of the Mahabharata war. And the date of the last day is 2nd November 5561 BCE. So very likely I will schedule this for a premiering on the 2nd November 2022. That would be 7583rd anniversary of a Shalya-Vadha. Okay, how do we get to that number? 5561 of the before Common Era, and add to that 2022 of the Common Era. That gives us 7,583 years. And then I started thinking, what astronomy evidence is there for the 18th day of the war, but also, if anything specific in the context of Shalya-Vadha or Shalya and a Yudhishthira. And then I realized actually there is, so let's begin with that. This is the scene of Yudhishthira killing Shalya, okay, with a very unique astra that Yudhishthira had to employ. You can go and read Shalya Parva and look at the descriptions of a fight and how finally Yudhishthira came to kill Shalya. Okay, a lot of things happened before that, not relevant to the request the individual made. The request was only related to astronomy evidence, so I'm going to limit myself to that. I will present two pieces of evidence for the 18th day. The first one is Saturn and Moon, okay, and its comparison, or rather their comparison with Shalya and Yudhishthira. Okay, this occurs on the 18th day of the war in the narration of the Mahabharata text. And this is some evidence that I was not aware until, I would say, last 2 or 3 years ago. Somehow, and in spite of my repeated readings of Mahabharata text, multiple different manuscripts, it had slipped through my attention. And if you start reading and studying Mahabharata in a particular context, you will actually have a similar experience. Even when you focus on the specific area that is of interest to you, the text of Mahabharata is so overwhelming in terms of its vichitrata, all the interesting things that are mentioned, that it's very easy to lose attention, okay, and miss something like this. So my thanks to Sai Swarupa Ayerji, who is a well-known author, has written a few novels based on the female characters from ancient Indian narratives. And I would encourage you to read her works. She was doing a detailed study of all the descriptions of the 18 days of the Mahabharata war, and she happened to bring this to my attention. In fact, I requested her when I came to know that she's doing a detailed study. I said, if you come across any astronomy related descriptions, please let me know. And she very kindly did those. This is one of that observation. Now, the fact that I missed it, and now I came to know of it only 2 years ago, whereas I have already figured out to November 5561 BC as the last day of the Mahabharata war as early as 2009. And if you look at the research work of great Brahmarshi Dr. Padmakar Vishnu Vartak, P.V. Vartak, then he had determined it as early as 1980, especially the 18 days of the Mahabharata war, starting with 16 October and ending with 2nd November 5561 BC. So the fact that, see, we have to take this as a blessing of a Vyasadeva and a Krishna and everyone. The fact that this wasn't deliberate on my part, the fact that I somehow missed this reference, the fact that I missed it has its value too. Okay, so what is this value? Because remember, I wasn't aware of this reference, and therefore it wasn't included in determination of the year of Mahabharata war or the 18 days of the Mahabharata war. frankly, suppose even if I would have come across this reference, all it would have done is I would have said, yeah, this corroborates the timeline, because the timeline itself does not require this reference, okay, for its determination. So in any case, it remains independent. My point is, it was not there even to create a bias in me, and definitely to create a bias in late, Dr. Brahmarshi P.V. Vartak, because he was also not aware of this reference, by the way. He was not aware of this reference. And I know it. How do I know it? Because I have had many multiple conversations in person, via email, and on the phone with him. All right. So what is this? What is so fascinating of this reference in the context? First, look at the reference, and then we'll talk a little bit more. All right. This reference occurs in Shalya Parva. Okay. So it is the one day when Shalya was the Senapati of a Kaurava army. And in describing the fighting between Shalya and Yudhishthira, Vyasadeva is describing this by, of course, remember, the celestial is equal to terrestrial. Okay. Yatha Pinde Tatha Brahmande, that Siddhanta is taken into, in recent times, in the modern science context, was reiterated, we can say, by Galileo of Galilee, right? Celestial is equal to terrestrial. Not only he just put forward a Siddhanta, because, there are many people who will throw out theories out there, but you have, after you propose a theory, you have to calculate the predictions from that theory, and then you have to take those predictions and do their comparison with actual evidence, actual observations. If you need to perform experiments, you perform the experiments. Like all these astronomy simulations are in a way experiments to generate the equivalent of a pratyaksha, what Vyasadeva would have seen 7,583 years ago. What is interesting is that in this comparison of celestial equal to terrestrial, to note down the events that are happening on the Terra at Kurukshetra, Vyasadeva is making use of many things. Of course, he's making use of terrestrial things, such as the descriptions of river Saraswati of the Mahabharata times. There are more than 100 plus descriptions of river Saraswati. He's mentioning certain things that relates to the seasons, the rutus, and also the lunar months. He is also giving, which has to do with, again, the precession of the Earth's axis. He's giving descriptions related to the number of soldiers, the exclusivity in the gender that were killed during the Mahabharata war, that now we can connect with the modern genetic evidence. And that also takes us to this particular timeline of the middle of 6th millennium BC. Vyasadeva is, so when I looked at this observation, or if somebody has not done anything or has not figured out a specific year for the Mahabharata war, this reference would not mean anything to that individual. But now that we have a specific year and a specific date, and now therefore we know the specific day, the last day of the war as 2nd November 5561 BCE, now the beauty, the value of this specific evidence is very obvious to us. Otherwise, it would not have been obvious. And also, as much as this is such a fascinating and exciting and very joyful thing for the claim of 5561 BCE, this is proving as a nightmare in a daytime for all other Mahabharata dating researchers, exceptions none. So what is this simple evidence? Actually, it's very simple. Vyadrushata tada shalyo Yudhishthira samipata. They are standing in front of each other, very close to each other, and fighting. And this particular terrestrial scene, Vyasadeva is saying, looked similar to what? Rane chandramaso bhashe shaneshchara iva graha. This particular scene looked like the Yudhishthira and Shalya fighting on the ground, looked like the moon and Saturn in the sky. Now, what is so special about it? Well, Vyasadeva has given many conjunctions of this kind. What is surprising, what was surprising, I should say, is that I found this combination almost a very odd combination for conjunction. Okay, I have seen moon described in the context of a nakshatra, like on the 12th day of the war. Mahabharata text tells us that the moon was near Kritika, and that beautifully matches 455-61 BCE. On the 16th and 17th day of the war, Mahabharata text tells us that the moon, full moon like moon, and same thing for the 12th day of the war, full moon like moon. And again on the 16th and 17th day of the war, full moon like moon. Now this is not to be confused having a Purnima day, full moon day every day, but that is what some extremely ignorant Mahabharata researchers have done. But that's a different subject. We will get back to that subject. So when we look at these positions, what is the comparison? The comparison of a full moon like moon near Nakshatra Kritika, or near Nakshatra Punarvasu, or near a nakshatra which represents the splitting of the equator, okay, the celestial equator from ecliptic, okay, so that is the point of an equinox. How beautiful. So that's fine. But what is so important about this is, now in this case, and then we have, of course, two planets, like Shukra with a Mars, Shukra with a Angarak, which is to say Mars and Venus, or Mars and Mercury, and so on. But this one is a moon and another planet. And actually, when Sai Swarupa Ayarji told me this, about this reference, I said, wow, moon and a Saturn. Interesting. And, you know, in my, this was nothing was in front of me. I was just saying, oh, moon, where would moon be? And I couldn't quite visualize. Actually, I should have been successful in visualizing. I knew it's near Pusha. Okay, the last day of the war, the nakshatra was a Pusha, and you find many references in the Mahabharata that has a great relevance for the beginning of a Kali Yuga. But I'll just briefly mention this. The new book of Jivan Rao is coming, and I would rather want all of you to read it there. But back to this moon and Saturn. So for a minute, I thought, I don't think this reference is going to be corroborated, going to be validated for 55-61 BC, and therefore the 18th day of the war. But lo and behold, you know, then actually I said, let me not even think. Let me just go to this simulation this time and just see what is being seen. And what I'm showing you is actually the picture that was seen either the 17th night of the war, 17th day's night of the war, or 18th day's night of the war. So it doesn't matter which one you take. ±1, ±2 is the flexibility we need, because we don't know exactly when the observation was made. In the morning, in the evening, that is after sunset, through the night, we don't know that. But it doesn't matter. In both cases, the answer would be same. But what is so fascinating, and I have summarized everything on this screen, is this. Lo and behold, on the 18th day of the war, the Saturn and moon, of course, we're talking through the night, the Saturn and moon were the only two grahas in the sky from the time moon rose in the sky, moon Udaya, okay, Chandramas Udaya. From that time, 10 or 11 p.m., depends on whether you take 17th night or the 18th night. And throughout the night, until sunrise, the only two celestial bodies, as in graha, the Indian definition of a graha, one that grasps, which means one that moves, Saturn, the only two graha that were in the sky for the entire night, practically after sunset, but let's say from the time moon was there, because that description is there, until sunrise, were these two, Saturn and moon. And they were actually pretty close to each other. Like Saturn is after 90 degree, and can I see these degrees? Let's see. Okay, so 0, maybe that's not 90, 30, sorry, 30 degree, 60, and 90. So 90 minus 30, so about 60 degrees within the span of 2 rashis. Okay, that's the distance. But more important, I mean, that is very important, that is very good, but only 2 graha in the sky. And that is how beautifully Vasudev is capturing it. So that is the evidence in the context of Shalya for the 18th day of the war. And there is another one which I have already discussed, and I'll get to that in a second. We won't need much time to describe it because I have done it elsewhere. So think of this Shalya-Yudhishthira combination, okay, fighting on the 18th day of the war, and that is compared with the Chandra, the moon, and the Saturn. Okay, 2 of them only in the sky doing the fighting. Okay, no other graha, no other important celestial body in the sky throughout the night. So that is the first reference. And the second one, it is just a repetition of it because I have done this before, possibly twice in this series, the Venus, Mars, and Mercury in front of Yudhishthira. On the 18th day of the war, 2nd November 5561 BC, when the morning battle is going on, Vyasa, the author of Mahabharata, tells us that Venus, Mars, and Mercury stood in front of Yudhishthira. Now, how do we understand this front of Yudhishthira? Of course, as far as the visual observation goes, they can be observed only after the sunset. In this case, only after the sunset, typically either before sunrise or after sunset. But in this case, only after sunset. So as far as the observation goes, it is only after sunset. But the description comes in the morning before noon. We know that from the Mahabharata descriptions. And the description says Venus, Mars, and Mercury were in front of Yudhishthira. Now, how do we understand this? Well, first thing, the verse comes as a Bhrugu Suno Dharaputro Shashi Jena Samanvita Charamam Pandu Putranam Purastat Sarva Bhubhujan. Okay, but to understand the front, you have to understand who is fighting from what side. See, Yudhishthira and Pandavas are stationed on the west side of Kurukshetra, and Kauravas are stationed on the east side of Kurukshetra. So when the fighting is happening, Yudhishthira is facing the eastern direction. Okay, now granted, while fighting, they can be looking in any direction, but just from a strategic positioning point of view for the both armies, Yudhishthira is facing the east direction, and you can perfectly match that. But what I'm going to, of course, show you is, because for a naked eye visibility, it has to be after the sunset. So I'm showing you this picture on the 2nd November again, 5561 BC, after sunset. This is from an astronomy simulation. Just after sun has gone below the horizon, actually you could see Jupiter, that also just let's imagine has gone below the horizon. Then we have a Mercury, we have Venus, and we have Mars, and they are within 30 degrees, just within one Rashi, one zodiac space. Okay, all 3 of them together. So that's another important astronomy evidence related to the Shalya and Yudhishthira and the 18th day of the Mahabharata war. If you want to see the exactly same picture in slightly different fashion, this was done by my good friend that now I have lost contact with him. He was in West Bengal and using another software. So this also shows the consistency of a software. He created this particular picture from that simulation. Again, Kurukshetra, Haryana, 2nd November, 5561 BCE, 7 p.m. after sunset. And you could see Mars, Venus, and Mercury. And they are, because just looking at the picture, you won't know how close or how far away they are. All 3 are within the 30 degree, one Rashi space, one zodiac space. Okay, so these are the 2 distinct, useful, very fascinating astronomy observations for the last day of the Mahabharata war. And I cannot help but repeat, no other Mahabharata dating researcher, no exceptions, will able to take these 2 observations and show them to be valid corroborated for their claimed year of the Mahabharata war, and specifically whatever they propose based on that year as the 18th day of the Mahabharata war. No other Mahabharata researcher, okay, dead or alive, okay, will able to validate, corroborate these two references for 18th day of their claim for the year of Mahabharata war. Now you start seeing how much evidence is not taken into account by these Mahabharata researchers. And when questioned, how they change the goalpost, start calling others, such as myself, names, try to distract me. And I love that. Okay, I'm a salesperson for a long time. And so they make some funny things about that too, the oil salesperson or snake oil salesperson. Well, I'm also a teacher all my life. Well, why just my life? That comes into my family tradition, on both sides of my family, on the mother side and a father side, including my both parents and their parents and their grandparents, including my family. It's like my brother and my sister-in-law. Everyone is a teacher. Okay, so I see how students may try to distract you when they want a break, or how someone else, like, an exam, like I teach here, by the way, occasionally into the universities in this area, or even outside Atlanta area. And, if I allow students to write the answers, say multiple choice answers, simply on a piece of paper, I'll tell you a funny thing they do, true or false. They will just write a T, like a capital T, but they will kind of also like it in such a way, they will extend that vertical line further and turn it a little bit. So almost like leaving it for me to guess whether it is a true or a false. Okay, so I have essentially seen all possible tantrums. Now, of course, it's very sad and unfortunate when a subject such as a Mahabharata, which is not, it's connected to us at an adhyatmic level, but not connected to our everyday affairs. Why people would go through these gimmicks, okay, and try to cheat people, okay, cheat our own civilization in its understanding of our itihasa or antiquity is frankly beyond me. But then, of course, if you start studying Bhagavad Gita, then it starts revealing to you why people do what they do. In any case, just from a factual perspective, these two references I shared for the 18th day of the war, no other Mahabharata no other Mahabharata researcher, dead or alive, will able to validate or corroborate this reference for their specific date, the year, and also the 18th day of the Mahabharata war. I think I'm done here. Okay, so then also some other big instances that happen on this day. One is the club fight, okay, between Duryodhan and Bhima. And this is where Balaram gets mad. Well, he shouldn't have, by the way, because when Bhim hit the thigh of Duryodhan, this is what he had said long time ago, that's what he's going to do, right at the time of the attempted Draupadi Vastraharan. Okay, sometime we'll talk about that also. I have given multiple lectures on Draupadi Vastraharan, but I don't think any of those lectures are available in public domain through YouTube. So he has made that pratigna that he's going to break Duryodhana's thigh. But Balaram gets angry, and Krishna says something in the context of Kali Yuga, but I'll again let you all read in the book of Jivan Rao, because he has done a very comprehensive study of it, and me giving some side reference is not very useful for this discussion. So again, my books, the Historic Rama, or 12,209 BCE. These all three books with the covers the way they look are available from Amazon around the world. Okay. And if you are in India, they are available through Subbu Publications, a much better quality in terms of the paper and overall, just a great quality. When did the Mahabharata war happen? That book, the foreword is given by great K.S. Narayanacharya. Number of you would know the names he has given. He passed away. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. Well, he is with us with all his lectures and all his 200 plus books. But I had a wonderful time meeting him in 2020, and just time went by. There was a time warp. We spent a whole afternoon, but it felt like I only had 5 minutes with him. Again, on another day, the next day, it was such a big gathering, but still he and me had a time to talk about very, very specific issues. And when we took, when I took a leave of him, he said, when are we going to meet next? And that time I said, well, very likely towards the end of 2020. This meeting was on the 1st and 2nd February. And he said, oh my God, that's so long. And it so happened I never had a chance to meet him again. He left his body some time ago, a year ago or so. But he has written a foreword to that book, okay, after reading in detail. So that itself is a reward, especially if you take that book from buy that book from Subbu Publications. Marathi translation of the historic Rama is in the pipeline, also known as AK 12,209 BC book. No difference, just the title difference. It's scheduled for upcoming Ram Navami. Let's work towards that. And then the Kannada translation of When Did the Mahabharata War Happen is coming out sooner. And just before I close, as I said, a lot of instances happen on the 18th day of the war, and just the next day, the continuation of that, which is when Pandavas followed Ashwatthama because of the heinous acts of Ashwatthama. And there was these two Brahmastra fighting against each other. I'll not take you into that story. But this is a transition almost of a yuga. And in that context, for all the details, and the book is written very well. Actually, the picture that I'm showing you on the back page, you can see my partial comments there about the book. It's a well-written book. It's a very easy read. It's a fast read. Okay, it's filled with references from Mahabharata. That is the emphasis of it, but it also, he has done a phenomenal job. Jeevan has done a phenomenal job pulling the references from other Puranas and so on. And you know what, guys, I'm telling this not as some marketing stuff about this book. I don't need to market this. The only reason I'm talking so much about this is to create the awareness. Why do I say that? There are folks who are connected to me on social media, whether it's say through Twitter or through Facebook and so on. And guess what? Most of us are lazy, I guess. They will tell me, and that happens all the time. It happens every week, every month. They will say, Nilesh ji, yeah, you've done a great work on the Mahabharata dating. Why don't you write a book about it, explaining it? They will say the same thing about Ramayana and so on and so forth. My point is, the person is connected with me for a few years through social media. And most cases, I'm not saying all cases, but most cases, that person sent me the request, which is to say, the person became aware of my work. And this person wants to connect with me, which is great, or following me, but is not even aware of my work. To the extent, the request sounds very genuine, but there is that element of laziness attached to it. So my point is, just like many people don't know that I have written books on the Mahabharata and Ramayana. So every time I make a point to show this to you guys. Similarly, this book is such a fascinating book, extremely original research. It's a very rare thing, guys. I will tell you from my experience, because I read a lot of books. Frankly, I'm a very fast reader also. Okay, if I tell you how fast I can finish a book, especially in the area where I have a decent background knowledge, you will not believe it. So I won't tell that to you some other time. But I read many books. Okay, I used to read like 20 books a month. Now it has come down to like 4 or 5 books. Like, I can show you here. Like, see here, these books. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So there are like right now 7 books. Actually, one of the book is mine. So let's say 6 books. Okay, so 6 books I'm reading right now. I read fast. And my point is, it is very rare that I come across original research, original work. And to just top it off, I mean, this may be interesting to some, it may not be interesting to others. Independent of it, you should read it, is that this is written by a 23-year-old individual engineer, computer science engineer, whatever his background, or sorry, electrical engineer, who started doing this research when he was 20, about 3 years ago. Okay, so this is not a marketing message. This is an awareness message. Okay, and the book is published by Subbu Publications. Of course, the book will be made available on Amazon also. And so, guys, purchase it, whatever is the most convenient to you. But if given a choice and the effort to purchase from either sources is the same, then definitely go for the Subbu Publications, okay? Because the every penny that gets contributed there, and that is saved after taking care of the basic expenses of printing, distribution, and shipping and whatnot, goes towards the dharma activity, okay? So with that, I will stop. Again, this was the astronomy evidence on the 18th day of the war, 18th day of the war in general, but specifically the request was in the context of Shalya and Yudhishthira. Initially, when I saw that, I said, well, I don't think there is anything specific related to Shalya and Yudhishthira. And then I realized, yeah, actually there is, which I have talked about many times, is that Moon and Saturn together seen in the sky, and their comparison with Shalya and Yudhishthira fighting on the ground, or you can say vice versa, Shalya and Yudhishthira fighting on the ground, and depiction of that done by Vasudev to preserve this particular celestial equal to terrestrial type of photo shot for us in the Mahabharata text. Okay, thank you very much again, and please watch this, share with your friends, educate your friends, as whatever we know, we should share with others, at least the like-minded folks, at least the people who are interested, okay, interested in improving themselves through Swadhyaya and so on. And that's what Ramdas Swami has also said, Zeze apanasi thave, okay, Tete itarasi sangave, basically what? Just make the whole population educated, jnani in that sense, right? All right, so with that, I'll see you very soon in another session of Shraddha and Pradnya. Namaskar.